I guess in my 52-year railroad career, I have walked to the moon and back on railroad platforms just like this in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And I've come to know there are a lot of untold stories and even a few secrets out there involving the railroad industry. Please join us and subscribe so we can continue to bring you those untold stories and even a few secrets from America's railroad past.
All aboard! Highball it, Eagle!
Have you heard the travel news about the Eagle Way? To your destination happening every day. The Texas Eagle is clicking on the rail. From the Windy City to the Alamo, meet you at the station, come on, let's go. People get ready and catch the wave. Catch the wave, the Texas Eagle Way. Through the heart of the nation of traveling.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my podcast. I've seen some trains before. Griff Hubbard with you here once again with probably the most distinguished group with whom I ever had the privilege to railroad. And from my left to my right, Jesse Padilla, the iconic Amtrak station agent from Austin, Texas, who became district manager of the Southwest. And to my immediate left, Tim Cooper, a Southern Pacific Railroad engineer who retired as superintendent of operations for the Southwest Division. Then to my immediate right, Dr. Bill Pollard, an Arkansas dentist who was an Amtrak employee and got smart and went to dental school and then got dumb and came back to the railroad to do contract work and dentistry. And last but not least, the world famous Joy Spencer Smith, who was the glue and the design line behind all of us. And we're going to tell several stories here today, ladies and gentlemen, but the primary focus of this podcast is on the remarkable story of revenue management of the Texas Eagle and Heartland Flyer and how it came out of corporate into the field and was successfully performed for almost 20 years by a small group of dedicated people that you see around this table. Ms. Smith, the first question I want to ask is of you. How does it feel to have, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Smith's team grew to well over 100 people in her career, her immediate team, as large as that sounds, but she did grow it to all facets of the operation. But how does it feel, once again, to have your original Texas Eagle team, the very first members of your original team, back around the table with you?
Makes me know how old I am. But before I answer that question, if I may, Griff,
Yes, ma'am.
why don't you tell our audience what revenue management means?
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. Well, we'll just begin the local revenue management story. Ladies and gentlemen, revenue management of a train has to do with pricing and capacity and how many seats on a train or how many rooms in the sleeping car and what prices to sell those rooms for. If it's not done correctly, you can have one part of the route that's extremely successful while the other part of the route is dying on the vine. And that's how we got into this, because one part of the Texas Eagle route was very successful and the other two-thirds was withering on the vine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a brief description of revenue management, and we will get into the weeds, perhaps more than you want to hear about it. But I want to go back to that as the host, Ms. Smith. How does it feel to have your original core team?
Oh, it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful. And especially, you all have always been such good-looking men, and you're still good-looking men. And you know how I love to have good-looking men around me, right? It feels wonderful to be able to sit and talk about the things that we did. And it feels extremely wonderful to know that each and every one of us have retired, except for Dr. Pollard, but each and one of us have retired, and we did not get fired for some of the things we did, because revenue management was a very risky and very unusual thing that Amtrak in all its history had never done before, had never allowed before, and have not allowed since.
Very, very true. let's just begin at the beginning here, ladies and gentlemen. Jesse Padilla and Dr. Pollard and myself had been proactive in the rail passenger service field and business and as employees and advocates for some years. And it just got to the point in the latter 90s where we began to realize that the Texas Eagle was a Chicago to Los Angeles passenger train, but it was really only being revenue managed properly between Chicago and St. Louis, meaning 2/3 of the route was not getting the attention it deserved. And so we approached Mrs. Smith and Mr. Cooper with an idea to bring revenue management out of corporate headquarters, something that had never been done before, and put it in the field, and that we would do it, meaning Jesse and Bill and myself. Ms. Smith, take the story.
Let me interrupt that, because when every month we would get a report on how the trains were doing.
Correct.
Remember that? So we would know how we were doing in revenue, how we were doing in ridership, how we were doing in customer service. Now, revenue and ridership was good between Chicago and St. Louis, but consistently we were poor between Little Rock, Arkansas, all the way down to San Antonio and out to California. And Jesse, who was our district manager in charge of the stations and paying attention to the ridership on and off, and Dr. Pollard, who was watching it, said something is wrong. We cannot be consistently down and out. They're trying to get rid of us. I said, okay, let's look at this. So we continued to watch it, if y'all remember, right? And we knew that was exactly what was happening when I got a 3-month report where the ridership and the revenue was exactly the same for 3 months. I said, there's nowhere in the world we could be at the same number 3 months in a row. We had to either go down or go up. And so we were wringing our hands about what to do. And Griff said, well, we need to take this over ourselves. Now, Tim and I, we weren't really into the revenue management part. You know, Tim is worrying about operating the trains and his conductors and on-time performance. That's what he's focusing on. And I said, what do you mean revenue manage it yourself? Now, remember, y'all were lead ticket agent, all right? Were you district manager then or lead ticket agent? I think you. Yes, yeah. Thank you. Ticket agent down there in Austin, Texas.
The job title was station agent in the
product line agent.
No.
You weren't a product line?
We invented the product.
That's
line.
right. I thought it was.
That hadn't happened.
That hadn't happened yet. Okay. So then the point is that they were contract covered employees who dare to say what they could do, which what corporate was doing on doing the revenue management. So Tim, never forget, Tim and I said, all right, guys, you have got to be willing to put Tim and my neck on the chopping block.
You did say that.
Yep.
And Griff said, well, I know we can revenue this train, Miss Smith, because I know Miss Maggie. I know what time of the month Miss Maggie is coming in. I know where Miss Maggie is going, and I know how much she's willing to pay. And I know when I can tell her that it's going to cost some X, Y, and Z one time, and I know I got to shiver it off another time for her to ride the train. In other words, you're telling me I know this passenger. I know what she'll do. I know what she won't do. I know what she will pay, and I know what she won't pay. Well, that's as close as you can get to a customer, right? I said, but Tim and I said, you still got to be willing to put our heads on the chopping block if you think you want to do that. So they backed up a little bit, and I actually thought it was over. I said, I really did. I said, they ain't going to do nothing, all right? And then the hook rang Dr. Pollard into this, who was doing his dentistry in Little Rock there, and was not really working for Amtrak, but he said I would help too because he was watching the train. And I think it took y'all about a month, Tim, when they came back to us and said, we got this. We know we can do this. About a month. Mm-hmm. It was about a month. Said, we got this. We know we can do this. I said, okay, well, we've got to get permission. So I knew we had to go to the top to get permission, because if we went from the bottom to the middle, we're going to be cut off anywhere we went there. So what we had to go to the president of Amtrak. At that time was George Warrington. So how are we going to get to George Warrington? All right. And I'm not always good at following chain of command. I'm not going to change it. Right. Anyway, we had an opportunity. Texas had loaned Amtrak $5.6 million, and Amtrak was preparing to pay the money back. And what happened there? We went
to Austin.
Oh, wait, okay. Amtrak was going to pay the money back.
Early,
which is what I asked them to do, too. All right? I remember telling them, I said, if you don't pay no other bill, you pay Texas. All right? You pay Texas back. At the same time that we were going back to repay Texas in Austin, George Bush was making his announcement that he was running for president the first time. So now we have the director in charge of government affairs come down as we go to the airport in Austin to pick up George Warrington. So I said to Griff, while we are driving him from the airport to the Capitol, you do your pitch to him. I sat in the car behind Griff so he could see my nod in the rearview window. The director of government affairs was as nervous as she could be, but she had no clue what we were going to do. Right. We didn't tell this to anybody but the inside folks. George, and I also told Griff, I said, George is a smoker, so let him smoke all he wants, because we got something to ask him. We got him in the car. I can see it just as clear as day. The first thing he did was light up that cigarette. And then he's looking out the window. And I said, George, Griff Hubbard, our lead ticket agent in Longview, has got a proposal he wants to present. And he presented that proposal. And I don't think George Warrington knew any more about revenue management than I did. But he respected an employee who had the passion and the desire to build the train and make it a success. That was what was the key here. He got out the car. He says, I'm getting married. And when I come back from my honeymoon, I'll set it up. And that was it. So now he comes back from his honeymoon. He tells his directors and vice presidents that employees are going to revenue manage the train, that corporate had to keep its hands off it. They wouldn't touch it.
Autonomous control.
That's right. Had to give them all of the whistles and bells in order to do it. And y'all did it in the living rooms of your home, on your own computer. Amtrak didn't give you a dime. You didn't get one nickel in overtime. None of you were working. You were up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. If the train had any kind of service disruptions, you could turn that inventory over in a second. So now you had to be trained. And I said, well, you got to go to Washington to be trained. I was a nervous wreck. I said, now they go to Washington, they're not going to treat my team very nice. So I called the woman in revenue management, and I said to her, I bet not hear anything but nice things that you did for my team when they come to Washington. And that was Tim, all of y'all. You, Doc, all of y'all went to Washington, D.C. I was a nervous wreck the whole time.
Our leader.
That's right. I was a nervous wreck because I knew if I got a phone call that said anything, I said, Lord, please let everything go well. And then I thought, they ain't going to be able to do it because it's just going to be too difficult. How are you going to do this? When y'all got off the train in Chicago? Coming back, and I was down on that platform, and I saw you walking. Your heads was high, and Tim, you know, he got that little bounce that he got when he walked, right? I said, we got it.
I was glad to be out of Washington.
I know. I said, Tim said, we got it. We can do this.
There was more drama behind the scenes.
Yeah,
though.
I want Tim to
Yeah, because I don't know what happened in Washington.
I want Tim to tell the story that I had forgotten, that when we got there, they were going to give Jesse and myself all of the whistles, lights, and bells, and just give Dr. Pollard a viewing capability.
I was going to, well,
That's
even before that, first of all, they were going to go be trained, and I was going to get a tour of Union Station.
Right. That's right.
And Tim Cooper said, oh, no, this is a 3-man team. And it was such an unorthodox
proposal that we were making in the first place.
That's right.
That 2 contracted employees and a dentist who had worked for Amtrak for a few months were going to take over the Texas Eagle Revenue Management. They thought, oh no, this guy he's from Arkansas, he can just go through a union station.
Right.
Well, I thought, no, that ain't going to happen. But
That's why Tim went, because I knew they would try some. And I'm not trying to say paint the company in a bad light. It's that anyone who is in charge of something and have a little area that is their responsibility is naturally going to be jealous and upset. Somebody's coming to take it, no matter what the reasons are, no matter how sound the reasons are. You're coming and taking from me something that I've been doing, and you can't do so and so and so and so. And that was what I knew was the issue there. Yeah. And that's why Tim had to go with you guys, because I don't know what they would have done if it was just the 3 of you by yourself. And you could have gave them a tour of Union Station.
well, here we are at the ticket agent level, and an outsider, and we're telling them we can do it better than you.
That's right.
After they've been doing it,
and that's
for
quite a blow.
Mm-hmm. It was.
That's kind of blow. Mm-hmm. Yes, right.
But she did, once it was said that, we're a team.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going back for the training. I was just there to support the team. But, with Dr. Pollard not being able to go back there, our team wasn't back there. So I told her, I said, everybody was very professional. There wasn't no upset. This is our team, and I can make a phone call if you want me to make sure we get our team back there.
That's right.
And she said, do what you got to do. So I did, and that was to you. And I don't know where you went.
Yeah, tell us that story. All right, Tim called you and says they're not treating them like a team. And what did you do?
I called George Warrington.
You did? I don't think
course.
I ever heard. I think I did.
Yes, I did. I told you that. I called George Warrington. George Warrington is the CEO and president of Amtrak. All right. I dare y'all have any contact with the president and the CEO of Amtrak. Right. I called George Warrington. I said, they're not treating my team too good. He said, I got it. He said, I'll take care of it. Tim didn't call me back. Yeah, and they
then
did
I took
that.
the tour of Union Station.
But they got to it right away, didn't they?
Right.
They did.
That's right. That's right. And how many? I don't forgot how many days was it? Was it
3?
3
days.
days. That's right. 3 days.
We got 3 days of pretty intense training. Yeah.
Well, I think they did that to try to make y'all feel how hard and difficult that was, but it wasn't.
Go ahead. I agree with that.
well, yeah, it was to make it appear difficult, but we had the strategy from 1960s, 1950s railroading that we were going to implement in the 21st century on a computer. So we had the idea of the ridership. We just needed to know how to tweak it to make it into the Amtrak system. Right. And so I think everybody was really pretty confident that we could do it. It was just a matter of the mechanics, which was pretty intense in itself.
Yep. And there was a lot of lingo we had to learn because the book they gave us was that thick, and they would go through it, and you have to do this and that, and that I think they were trying to intimidate us.
Yes, I think so too. I always felt that because y'all had a bunch of books under your arms when you came back, and you didn't need all of that.
While we were waiting on that call, I just had a flashback. While we were waiting on that call back from Mrs. Smith, from George Warrington, back to you, I think they had already started training us, and you were just kind of sitting out in the room for a little bit.
A little bit,
I think they'd already taken us back and started the process.
Yeah, that's why Tim Collins said he wasn't back there. He was simply part of the team. He was part of the team. But what also fascinated me was how quickly we turned the train around. That's what fascinated me.
Well, we're going to tell that story here. We have the proof of how the train turned around. I want to remind the folks we decided early on how we were going to divvy up the division of labor, and Jesse Padilla, one of the most, if not the most honest men that I know in all of his affairs and endeavors, we decided that Jesse should be in charge of the short haul ridership between Chicago and St. Louis because he would be fair-minded and do the right thing. And Dr. Pollard and I, if you asked Dr. Pollard or Griff Hubbard whether we were going to take an Austin passenger versus a Joliet or Bloomington passenger, well, it's pretty clear cut. Screw the short haul, we're taking the long haul. And we knew to make this work, Jesse had the capability to be fair, and you were. And Dr. Pollard because of his knowledge. You know, Dr. Pollard is a published author of more than one railroad book, and I think you have one in the works now, do you not?
Oh, good.
And Dr. Pollard had studied the Pullman Company, the original American sleeping car company strategies for many years, and, you know, don't fix something that's not broken. And we knew he could apply that to the sleeping car.
Oh, my God. And do you remember Dr. Pollard could revenue manage your sleepers? I mean, you did a wonderful job.
Tell the story.
The people would get off at Little Rock on train number 22, 3 o'clock in the morning, and he had folks getting on their sleeper at 3 o'clock in the morning. People would get off at St. Louis and want to ride the sleeper from St. Louis into Chicago. That's the end of the trip. And he's selling out the sleepers. It was just amazing what you could do.
Didn't you have sleeping car attendants complain to you
Oh,
that
yeah.
the turnover was too
Oh
heavy?
yeah, because we had the discipline one, because the sleeping car people could have their breakfast, all their meals came with it, and he didn't want to deliver the first class meals to them, so we had to bring him in the office and have a little talk to him. I dare you complain about being busy. That's what he was complaining about, being busy.
On the Chicago to St. Louis sleeper, if the rooms didn't turn over about 3 times en route, I feel like we weren't doing as much as we could. We sold a lot of rooms Chicago to Bloomington.
Yes, you did.
When there were people getting on at Bloomington going south. We sold a lot of rooms Austin to San Antonio when everybody had gotten off at Dallas or Fort Worth and the train was running empty down there, just where they could have the privacy of a sleeper. And all this was not new history. This was Pullman day room technology from 1937.
And all they needed is someone to pay attention to what was going on.
Exactly.
Because you couldn't knock out the long haul guy for the short haul. But yeah.
When that revenue started going up and the ridership started going up, they were just absolutely baffled.
I think we surprised ourselves.
Let's digress for just a second, just to make sure we have the story in place. Jesse revenue managed the corridor, and don't forget, we were charged with they wouldn't give us the Chicago-St. Louis corridor unless we took all of we had every train between Chicago and St. Louis for the first several years of this operation. So we weren't only revenue managing the Texas. I think they may have said that as maybe a little form of intimidation, but we were happy to take all 6 of those trains, and we did. So Jesse took the Chicago to St. Louis corridor, Dr. Pollard the sleepers, and I took the coach passenger inventory, and all of the group moves. And I just want to interject here. I was telling this story just the other day. That's why it's fresh on my mind. Ladies and gentlemen, I have frequently said that local revenue management of the Texas Eagle is not rocket science. And in fact, I made that statement in corporate, not to be smart aleck, I don't think, but as a matter of fact, and it didn't go over well. But I still say it is not rocket science. You just have to know who the passenger is and why they're traveling and when they're traveling. And guess what we did? And I would suggest, I want to be very cautious here in deference to my boss, who I still consider Miss Smith my boss, whether we're working or not working. But I wish no ill statement toward the company, but I don't know that the thinking exists today to be able to do things like this. You know what we would do with group moves? If Train 21, the Texas Eagle, let's say, were sold out or near capacity in Texas, I'm going to use Marshall to Longview, 23-minute ride as an example, but we did this between Temple and Taylor and other stops too. We would just simply close the lounge car for 23 minutes. It closed the lounge car to public occupancy and put 100 school kids in it, and ride them 23 minutes Marshall to Longview. And you say, well, that's not much revenue, but watch what happened. Marshall, Texas got credit for 100 people getting on. Longview, Texas got credit for 100 people getting off. And you do that a third of the month, meaning 10 times out of the month. And guess what? You've got 1,000 extra passengers just by a simple little plan.
And the word of mouth got around. They went from Austin to Taylor, and they went from San Marcos to Austin, and Taylor to Temple, and it just kept going on.
Absolutely.
And what the company didn't seem to understand, or at least at the level that we were hearing feedback, was these little kindergarten kids, these are tomorrow's
Right,
passenger
that's
riders.
right.
Thank you for
This
saying
this is a
that.
whole new generation of passenger train rider that we're putting on at no cost to the company, and you're getting a little bit of revenue out of it. It was a good program.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that's why local revenue management, we came up with the slogan, hands-on, on-site. In fact, we had some buttons made that said that. And here's how it works. You just have to know, but we already knew. You have to know the conductors and the engineers and the superintendents of transportation and the train chiefs and the onboard attendants and we already had firsthand knowledge. At the risk,
I think, Tim, all of our conductors knew they were revenue managing the train.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So wasn't it? I mean, the conductors from San Antonio all the way up to Dallas and Fort Worth.
Well, actually, some of them was asking why all of a sudden are we seeing more business south of St. Louis?
Yes.
It,
The
rem-
sleepers.
it
Yeah.
reminds me, God rest his soul, we even made a fan out of Glenn Millot. the
Oh, my
mechanical
God,
foreman
yes.
at Fort Worth.
Oh, my
We even made a
goodness.
fan out of Glenn.
Yes, that's right. I remember that. But the other thing that I think that I want to say is that based on what you guys did, the company, I can't remember how did we create a revenue management team of employees that revenue managed the Crescent.
Well, we're going to talk
Okay,
about that.
right,
We're
right.
going to go there. I just want to. So for the purpose of our viewers, in my spiel to Amtrak President George Warrington in the car from Austin to the state capitol to pay back the loan that the state of Texas had given Amtrak, what I told Mr. Warrington, and I have to be honest, Dr. Pollard and I had to have several discussions about this before it happened, because I said I want to guarantee Mr. Warrington $1 million in 12 months. I want to guarantee Dr. Pollard. If you remember, you said, "Well, now let's think about this."
$1 million more.
$1 million more. That's
I
what
want
you
to
promised them.
guarantee
Yeah.
President Warrington $1 million, real cash. We're not talking about on paper. We're talking about the real deal in 12 months. And Jesse and Bill and I came to a meeting of the minds, and that's exactly
Yeah,
what.
and you and Jesse and Bill came to a meeting of mine because y'all didn't tell me about that part.
That's true.
That's right.
We kind of
That's right.
sprung that on.
That's
we
right.
Did. Well, you. That's when your eyes got wide. in
That's
that rearview
right.
mirror.
I said, "Oh Lord."
So we guaranteed him, and what we actually did, and in fact, we have evidence here. I'm going to reach behind me. Bill, can you grab that first one? This was actually made, ladies and gentlemen, before the final results were in. But here's the $1 million check that we gave to President Warrington after the first year. But we actually did not make him $1 million. We made him, after the final tally, $1.8 million.
Right.
So we had turned that train to a $1.8 million net gain in 12 months through the process of local revenue management. And here's the facsimile of the check we gave him, although this is just for the original guarantee. In fact, we were going to put the $1.8 million on it. Ms. Smith said, no,
You
go
told
back
them
to
a
your
million,
original promise, because that's what you did. So I believe we presented him this check in front of Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison
Yes.
In Fort Worth, Texas. That's right.
I thought we did.
Yep.
And
And it was 2 months early, I believe.
I believe you're right, too.
Oh yeah, we
October.
did it. We did it ahead of time.
That's how come we
Yeah.
didn't know for sure it was 1.8
Right.
million. Yeah, that's right. It was. Gosh, you've got a great memory.
They were in Texas because the Texas Eagle was going daily over the entire route, which it had not been at that point. It was 3 or 4 days a week. So you had the perfect storm of
Right.
the senator, the president of Amtrak, and the opportunity to present the check all at once.
Right. And Tim, if I can digress just a few seconds here, do you have any recollection of? Okay, Miss Smith, we're in Washington in corporate headquarters being trained on at 10G. Is that in that
That's
right?
right.
10G.
10G Street. When Miss Smith got a hold of Mr. Warrington, do you remember how that was communicated back to you that Dr. Pollard was a go? Did they just say it's done, or?
No, I never did hear back from Joy. She said, "I'll call you back if something isn't going our way." So I never heard back. And about 30 minutes later, I believe, after the phone call, young lady come out, and I'm sorry I don't remember her name. She said
Jackie Byrne.
She said, "Mr. Pollard, Dr. Pollard, follow me," and I went and took a tour of the Union Station after that.
The rest was history. Yeah.
The rest was history.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But we really did something unique, not just in the revenue management, but think about how we involved all the agents up and down the line, the
oh my
conductors.
God, yes.
The
yes.
conductors, everybody
Yes.
knew what was going on, and they helped.
All of the, Jesse, that's a great point, because all of the ticket agents from San Antonio all the way up to Little Rock could tell you what the ridership was, what the revenue was. If the report or the monthly report came out and said something was wrong, they could go and say, no, Ms. Smith, we didn't do that, and we didn't spend so and so and so and so.
Yeah.
And my God, were they on top of everything.
Well, Bloomington and Springfield jumped in on
that's
it too.
right. That's true. I forgot about old Bloomington. Yes,
They sure did.
Yes,
Ladies and gentlemen, there was here's what we did by accident. I have to confess, we did set out to do some things, but this was an accident. There was actually a group report that Amtrak put out every month on the corporate and divisional level. It's called Who's Up and Who's Down. And it was a list of every train in the system, long haul and short haul, and how they were performing. And in our first year of operation, we were on top so much that they canceled the report, Who's Up and Who's Down. Now, we didn't set out to do that, but I'll tell you what we did set out to do. If you'll remember, when corporate canceled the report, the Texas Eagle Local Revenue Management team started producing Who's Up and Who's Down every month.
And not only did you produce Who's Up and Who's Down, you also kept a tight rein on time performance. So we were sending those reports about on-time performance and delays. We were collaborating with the Union Pacific and the BNSF Railroad. Those was things that we could work with and do for them. You were determined to be successful, but you knew in your gut and in your soul that you were going down the right road. You could do this, and we did
feel it.
You could feel it. You knew it was right.
Right.
You knew it was right. And I think what amazed me was how all of your peers and coworkers jumped in and joined in with the team. They all wanted to be a part of. And I forgot Glenn Millard, who was the foreman, mechanical foreman, was a most not a very positive man. And he could always say, no, that ain't gonna work. No, I think we got a bad problem. I got a bad feel about this. That ain't gonna work. When he's joined, said, y'all got something. We said, I was a little worried then. I said, because if Glenn think it's gonna be all right,
Let me tell you how Glenn knew we had something. Now, ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed colleagues here, with what a privilege each of you are to me being here today. Thank you for coming on this podcast. They're sick of hearing this ad nauseum, but I came up with the statement because it was just true, that you take the local revenue management process down to the most common denominator with the passenger. And I would always say, who do you think does the bathroom bowls at Longview? Me.
Yeah.
You don't get any closer to the passenger than that on a daily basis. So I would use that as an example until wonderful, God rest his soul, Glenn Millard one-upped me. And he called me up one day, and he was a supporter. He wasn't criticizing. He said, what are you doing to this train? He said, do you realize the toilet dump we're doing at Fort Worth between the train coming out of San Antonio to Fort Worth? We never had much toilets to dump. Now they're full every trip. And I said, well, Glenn, we finally found somebody that's closer to the passenger than I am.
That is
so,
true.
So I began, Glenn would communicate with us, and I began to use those toilet dump figures as an indicator of how we're doing in revenue management. Because Dallas to St. Louis and Chicago was historically the strong end of the ridership and revenue performance of this train. Fort Worth to San Antonio lagged behind. And when Glenn all of a sudden began to see these toilet dumps become significant, that helped that we were also in the right track.
Yeah, well, one of the best things I think that we did was these group moves, and everybody jumped on board, and you did an excellent job coordinating those groups. You
remember we went out and had a meeting out at Riverside and met personally with the group that's out there.
Yes.
Velvet Samuels, wonderful woman, and went through. So when they called about any group that was getting on the Texas Eagle, they would call Griff.
Right, exactly.
All right. And that, because groups was a good source of revenue, particularly when you had your non-seasonal days. When the ridership is normally down, that's when we put those groups on the trains.
Yep.
Right? And they had a wonderful relationship because they had someone that they could call in the field to ask certain questions, and then could get back and tell the group, we can do this or we can't do that.
But it was an instant response, not days later.
No, that's right. Right on. You're correct with that.
That is one thing I think that the call centers, the Amtrak call centers, appreciated in those years of local revenue management, because they didn't have to send a message that may or may not be responded to in days. We could confirm a group within seconds.
That's right.
You know how many groups that we turned down on the Texas Eagle?
Hundreds.
In 20 years, turned away.
How?
0. We found a way to accommodate. If you had a group, we found a way to get you on.
Well, here was the other thing I just thought of. We're talking about Lynn Barbarian. Lynn Barbarian was the general manager in charge of customer service out in Los Angeles, California. As the Texas Eagle arrives in San Antonio, the Sunset Limited, which operated out of Los Angeles to San Antonio and then on into New Orleans, was a California train. When the revenue started, and we would take, when the Texas Eagle got to San Antonio, 2 coaches and a sleeper would cut off and attach to the Sunset to go out to California. All right. I had on a morning call, and Lynn Barbarian, God bless her, was trying to say that the revenue and ridership on those 3 cars belonged to the Sunset. I don't think y'all knew about that argument. I said, oh no, how in the world are you going to take the revenue? We bringing the people to you. All you doing is hauling them to Los Angeles. You had nothing to do with those cars those cars are filled out of Chicago and at every stop going down. We had a big argument about that. Of course, we won. Yeah. We won. We would not give it to the Sunset. Yeah. So then I guess they said they couldn't beat us. Then they wanted to join us. So you had to revenue manage the Sunset.
Well, we revenue managed the through cars of the Texas Eagle,
and they were ours. Yes, not the Sunset.
Yeah. I want to make Dr. Pollard nervous here just for a second, because for Bill and I have been friends since the day we never met in 1968. So for 5 decades, 6 decades anyway. And I've made him nervous with numbers over the years, because I'll get something in my head and he'll be the first to say, well, now let's wait a minute and see if we can back that up. But I'm still telling you, ladies and gentlemen, in the local revenue management process, we found that you could make enough income to at least put a bite into avoidable loss on the long distance trains. Oh, maybe we couldn't cure it, but we could take a significant bite out of that. And if it had ever had the opportunity to go nationwide, I think you would have seen something extremely significant to Amtrak's future. And I want to ask this question: How did we locally revenue managed the Texas Eagle for almost 20 years, and we local revenue managed the Heartland Flyer, the Fort Worth to Oklahoma City Heartland Flyer, for almost 19 years. Did Oklahoma ask us to,
yes,
because of our success? Tell us that story. How did we get the Heartland Flyer?
Well, the Heartland Flyer, as you know, is a state-supported train. The state of the DOT of Oklahoma paid Amtrak to operate its train from Oklahoma.
And Texas.
And before we get to Texas, pay Amtrak to operate its train from Oklahoma City into Fort Worth. I'm not quite how many years we did that before Oklahoma was having financial problems. Looked like we would have lost the Heartland Flyer. And one of the chairpersons of their local revenue, not local revenue management team, but
Their advocacy team,
team said, well, look what they're doing on the Texas Eagle. Why can't we have someone revenue manage our train for us? And before, I don't know whether we revenue managed before Texas gave us the loan or after Texas gave us the loan. I think it was after. When it looked as if the Heartland Flyer would not be able to pay us the following year to operate the train, we went to Texas and had to show Texas how they benefited from the Heartland Flyer coming into Fort Worth, Texas all the time, and what a wonderful partnership that would be. And Texas, to this day, still pays a percentage of the operating costs for the Heartland Flyer, which celebrated 30 years a couple of weeks ago. All right. So that's how we, and then the chairperson, Judy Elmore, asked, I think she asked you, Tim, can they take over revenue managing the Heartland Flyer? And that's how you guys got into it.
And we took that train autonomously, and while under the heading of not rocket science, we would raise a few eyebrows when all of a sudden ridership and revenue would skyrocket. And let me tell you the deep dark secret that we were doing. There was a Protect coach in San Antonio on the layover days from the Tri-Weekly Sunset Limited that needed to be there in case it needed to be used as Protect equipment for the Sunset. But on the 2-day period, I think it was a Thursday, Friday, if I'm not mistaken, on the 2-day period where that car wouldn't be used, we put it on the back end of train number 22, the Texas Eagle, and ran it all the way through to Oklahoma City.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right.
And you do that a few times a month. Guess what happens at the end of the month? All of a sudden, you have this blossoming flower of ridership and revenue, and everybody's scratching their heads when all it is just paying very close attention.
Well, let me say this. Number one, I'm very grateful to our company, Amtrak, for having faith in us and allowing this to happen. I always, God bless George Warrington, that he did that.
Yes.
But number two, one of the reasons that I've often thought this, that we were successful, the revenue management team in Washington, D.C., are many, many miles away from our long-distance trains once they leave wherever they are. Also, our revenue management team worked 9 to 5. And what I found and discovered, you cannot properly revenue manage a train that is out on the road every day, somewhere, some hour of the day, of the 7 days that's in a week, a train is out on the road. Yep. You cannot manage it 9 to 5.
Right.
You have to be on top of the game. I remember when we had a service disruption down in San Antonio on 21 or 22, and right away you guys could adjust the revenue, make the changes that need to be changed so that we would come out positive. And that's one reason I think Washington, D.C. was not as good. It was too many trains, not enough people, and not familiar enough. That's the other thing. You've got to know about your trains. Now, Northeast Quarter, they're right there in the Northeast Quarter. Those trains are only going from Washington to New York and in Philadelphia in between, and then you got them going from Washington to Boston. You can kind of do that. You're sitting right on top of that. But when you've got a train that's leaving, going to Chicago, going to California, going to Miami, it's hard to put your arms around it. So I just want to say that. It's not that our company was just so damn dumb that they wasn't paying attention to it. It's that you didn't have the manpower to put on what you would have had to do. Remember, you guys was cheap. You were doing this on your own time. You didn't get paid any kind of overtime, any kind of compensation for it at all. And using your own computers.
Right. Well, it's like what Griff said, taking a bite out of the loss of revenue.
Yes.
They didn't understand the domino effect when that train had to leave Los Angeles 4 days prior to getting, up here.
Right.
And it was already, 3, 4, 5 hours late.
Right.
And people would change their plans, and we would change their the pricing and strategy so that they would not cancel their reservation.
That's right.
we were so determined that this was going to work. We were going to make it work.
Yes, you were.
There was not a time over the 18 years that I went on vacation, and this is true for both of you too. On vacation, I had a laptop computer with me every
Yes, you
time,
did.
every day. And not that I spent all day working on it, but every day we all got in and checked our respective parts. I checked the sleeping car and tweaked it. You checked the coaches and you checked the short haul. So that's something, again, to what you said, 3 people managing one train, micromanaging with a determination. And we shouldn't forget, we had just come off a few years earlier a very real risk that the Texas Eagle was going away. We all had in our mind in summer of '97, discontinuances notices went up all up and down the route that the Texas Eagle was going away on May 10th, and it didn't. But we had a lot of motivation, and the teamwork from all the people up and down the railroad. It was because they had the same thing. They saw their jobs potentially going away, and this was something that was going to help protect their job and also build a train. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah, they took us out of the national timetable. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
The map and everything.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That was a real wake up call.
Yes.
Under the heading of this not being rocket science, how about, I want to repeat this on purpose because I think it's important. In just under 20 years of locally revenue managing the Texas Eagle or the Heartland Flyer, we turned down 0 group moves. If you had a group move and you wanted to ride, we found a way for you to
And those
ride.
groups were how large?
Those groups could be anywhere from 20 to 100,
Yeah.
depending on the group size, and their needs. But we turned down nobody, and we made in the course of our history of local revenue management, this team made 2 presentations to Amtrak's National Board of Directors. Once in Atlanta, Georgia, and once in Washington, D.C. And
we also had once George Warrington left. Who was that? That was that Gunn? The point is, I think we had 3 presidents of Amtrak that supported y'all, because remember, that's 20 years of doing this. And in those 20 years, I believe we had 3 presidents, with the last one being Joe Boardman.
Actually, they were from George Warrington to Joe Boardman. There were 6 people in between. Alex Kumant.
Oh, I forgot about Alex.
Hughes,
Yes,
David
yes,
Hughes,
that's Hughes,
David
right.
Gunn.
David Gunn. Right. All supported this group, different presidents. That was what was fascinating to me, because every time we changed leadership in Washington, I was nervous. I said, okay, they're going to get rid of us. That's going to be the end of my team, how I'm going to tell the guys. But the other thing you 3 must admit to, you love what you were doing. Y'all love revenue managing the train. Oh, my goodness, you loved it. Nothing stopped you from doing it, especially when I know that Dr. Pollard was going on vacation. I tell you, I admire his wife for putting up with him. And he's got the laptop, and he's on vacation and telling me, I already dressed the sleepers. We okay with that. I said, oh, my God, you wherever you were going. It just amazed me, the love and stuff that you had. And, of course, as they say, you find something that you love doing, it no longer becomes work. Now, remember, you are the lead ticket agent in Longview, Texas. You still the lead ticket agent. You're still doing your day-to-day work. You're a district manager. You're still doing your day-to-day work. I feel sorry for your patients, Dr. Pollard. But I can imagine, I used to often imagine, Bill, that you had a patient with their mouth open and doing a cavity or something, and you get a call about the Texas Eagle. I said, I really feel sorry for the patient.
you can't tell me that didn't happen at least once.
Oh, it happened numerous times. And furthermore, if it was a good call, that some thing was going on, not a big deal. If it was a bad call that things were going south,
Yes.
I didn't have time to do dentistry then. I needed to get the railroad taken care
I
of.
know that's true, because if I called at his office, she didn't say, all I had to do was say, this is Joy. And I didn't even get a chance to say Joy Smith in the Texas. She knew who I was. She just a moment, I'll connect you through. He had already trained them. If it's a Texas Eagle, we want to know about it right away.
Not only did we have the approval of 6 Amtrak presidents, which you're absolutely right, and any one of them could have said no.
That's right.
But they were seeing the results of our production, and they left us alone. And it's interesting, in the interest of not being chewed out tonight by my boss, Joy Smith. By the way, if you hadn't been on the end of an ass chewing from Miss Smith, you're missing something now, because she can tell you how the cow ate the cabbage.
Oh, Lord.
Even if you're not an employee.
Even if you're not an employee. Thank you, doctor. Thank you. But I want to be very objective here. But the last fiscal year that we revenue managed the train, meaning the whole fiscal year, was FY17. Mm-hmm. And the Texas Eagle finished FY17 number of the entire nation, number 1 in ridership, number 1 in revenue, number 1 in improved on-time performance, and number 1 in improved customer service index scores. Now, you would think that you would want to clone that team and make this happen on other routes. And the reward we got for that was the very next year being disbanded. And I'll leave it at there. I'll leave it at there and be objective. But I want to give another secret while it's on my mind of local revenue management. And, service disruptions are going to occur.
Yes.
The freight carrier is going to have, unfortunately, a derailment in front of you, or there is going to be a hurricane or a flood or a tornado, a natural disaster. And you know what? The revenue management process would just blanket shut down the train everywhere. If there was a service disruption. Well, one thing that local revenue management could do, because we were the people calling out the buses for the service disruption, we're all involved in this process, we would just go into the system and close the sleeping cars for obvious reason. The bus doesn't have private compartments. But then we would just make the bus inventory match the train inventory, and people would say, "How can you not have a ridership loss in the service disruption?" Well, we didn't have a ride because we were still carrying people. Mm-hmm. We didn't shut down any part of a route or any part of a train, that was being provided alternate transportation.
And if, say, the train had a service disruption between Little Rock and Fort Worth, CNOC, the National Operations Center, would shut down the entire train from Chicago to San Antonio. Well, the train was still running Chicago to Little Rock, and Griff would immediately go in and reopen the inventory. It was still running from Fort Worth to San Antonio, so we would go in and reopen the inventory. I would know that through sleeping power passengers were not going to be on there, so that part on the south end would be priced at a fire sale, because if we could put anybody in the sleeper at that point, it was more than we had otherwise. So, and that just happened routinely, just with any type of disruption.
But the wonderful relationships that you guys encourage. You would think at the beginning we understood the hesitation and the apprehensiveness of not wanting, because you're taking something from us. But you earned the respect where CNOC would call you guys first.
Anytime. When
there was and they're sitting at national headquarters in Philadelphia. The group desk out in Riverside, California, would call you first to tell you about these needs and things, and can you do this? I remember Mineola, once they found out about the group moves, would buy out 3 or 4 coaches from Longview to Mineola. How long a ride is that?
45 minutes.
45 minutes. But they used that as a revenue generator for the things that they were doing in their community. And I remember, oh, you can't do that. They can't tie up the ridership on that little short place. The train attendants out of Chicago knew what was going on and was glad, because when you're a train attendant, you want passengers in your coaches. You won't be sitting around not doing nothing the whole trip or worrying about where the passengers are, because then you're afraid that you're going to lose your job if you don't have the ridership. They would get the car together from Marshall, Texas, get those seats turned and ready to go, pick the people up at Mineola, drop them off at Dallas, and it was just wonderful how you generated the teamwork and the togetherness of everyone wanting this to be successful.
Well, one of the things that I always found it comical kind of was, well, we can't send an extra car from Chicago down there just for that short. Why not?
Why not?
And we would sell it.
Thank you, Jesse. That's a perfect example. When we did get extra equipment for the Mineola wine trains, which no longer exist, unfortunately, what we would do, that coach would, of course, be exclusive occupancy from Mineola to Fort Worth. So what we would do would be to aggressively sell that coach from Chicago to St. Louis to Marshall. And in Marshall, we would have that coach emptying out, or certainly by Longview, so that it would be ready for occupancy again at Mineola. Again, the heading of under the heading of not rocket science. It's just
and you have to be on top of it. That's the key. You have to be on top of it. You've got to be paying attention to it all the time. All the time, and that's what happened. I think when you change leaderships, they have a different opinion, a different game plan, a different goal, how they see things. And the leadership that came in, 2017, just felt that we did not need that. I think they felt that you can't control if you got a bunch of independent people out in the field doing revenue management. How could you control that? I wish they'd have called me so I could have told them how to do it. But they didn't call me to tell, because it would have been very easy to control it. Yeah.
Well, it took a lot of cooperation with the operations department, because how many times did we call you and ask for that Protect coach or this or that?
yes.
And he wouldn't make it happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the National Operations Center, CNOC, also, will bring them into the loop, and after they got their hands around what was going on, they would do everything possible to make a group move at the last minute available. Something out of Chicago, what they had there. It wasn't just no. They would, after they found out what we were doing, why we needed it, other than we just need a car.
Yeah, right.
Here's why we need the car, and
right.
they would go to work on it.
That's what impressed me, is how you generated the support and all the way across the country. Here you are sitting here in Longview, and Tim, your office is in Dallas, and you sitting up there in Little Rock, and you have generated and earned the respect of people who are sitting in Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia headquarters, and the folks out there in the Chicago yards of mechanical who you have never met. And to this day, you haven't met some of them. Tim may have met some of them. We would go into certain meetings in D.C. That was really what that impressed me, and I thought was going to be the catalyst that would make the company realize that this was a good thing and create local revenue management across the trains. Now, we're only talking about, and to this day, we still only have 13 long-distance trains, and that's all we were talking about.
Well, during those conference calls, when there was a service disruption, when we'd get on it, this was already done on the Eagle. Well, it hadn't been done on other trains, but we had already taken care of our part. And they appreciated that.
Good point. Well, let's not forget that because of our success story, out of the clear blue, all of a sudden they send employees off the route of the city of New Orleans and off the route of the Crescent to Dallas for us to train them. And both of them had successful revenue management projects, but they didn't last but a couple of years.
That wasn't that Donna on the Crescent?
Yes.
Oh, she loved
Donna
what she was
Dix.
doing. Donna Dix did a wonderful job on the Crescent. And who was that on the city?
He's retired now.
Out of New Orleans.
Agent at New Orleans.
Right.
I'm sorry, his name, I can picture his face. David, I'll think of it when it...
You'll think of it once we're out of here.
It wasn't
That's what you
Giesling,
think.
was it?
No.
David...
But the point is that it was not difficult to sell to sell this revenue management. That's what always impressed me. That it was something that it seemed like everybody understood and got on board with it right away. When it's not the type of thing, people don't talk revenue management every day. That's not the conversation. If you're on trains, what you're usually talking about is on-time performance or how things are not working on board the train, the employees. You don't hear people talk about the revenue management side. And that's what impressed me about how you generated so much respect and people who played a role and they wanted to do their part. CNOC is a tough group to work with, because they're running the whole country and looking at trains from going everywhere. There's a lot of pressure there. And I think we helped take some of that pressure off of them when they knew there was a group that could say, yes, we've done such and such a thing. Yes, it's did such and such. Done.
Already got the buses.
Already done. Right.
The first few times they were somewhat hesitant is the word, yes. But after they saw that y'all knew how to order the buses as well as they did, that's just one less headache for them to deal with.
That's right.
Back to the Crescent, one of the things that brought that team into bearing was Jack Martin, who was then the president of the National Association of Railroad Passengers.
That's right.
And he was following closely what we were doing with the Texas Eagle. And the Crescent was his baby, so to speak.
Right.
He lived in Atlanta. And so he got with John Robert Smith at the time and managed to get that started. The board chairman, yes. He was the board chairman.
Yeah. But I remember somebody saying, you guys must be crazy to be doing this every day. They're
right.
Middle of the night.
And especially they could not believe you all were doing this without being paid.
Right.
There was no it was no overtime, there was no extra money, the only thing is that they gave you access to the system that you needed in order to operate. Other than that, you didn't get anything.
I think it boils down to, these are your words. I heard you said this to me one day. You said, Hubbard, you're doing this because you've been there and you don't want future generations to have to be there again. You want to put this train on solid economic footing where we don't have to go through the train offs and the budget cuts and the slashes and the am I going to have a job next week? And I said, that's exactly where my passion comes from. You are so right.
And I look at the young people that you have working in the Longview ticket office today. One young lady's just been there 2 weeks. The other young lady has been with Amtrak 12 years, but she's only been in Longview. And they just take it for granted that you got a train coming every day, and not have any clue that this almost would have been a yesterday story, and so it goes on, and so I hope they have the same passion and love to keep things going on, and knowing that you're standing on the shoulders of you guys who have made it possible for them to be there today. I really do believe that.
I want to digress to our two board presentations for just a second. The first one in Atlanta, Georgia, where we presented before Amtrak's Board of Directors, and I'll never forget it. The man's name was Linwood Holt, and if memory serves me, he is the former governor of the state of Virginia. And after we made our presentation, he said out loud into the room, "Why aren't we doing this nationwide?"
Yes, he did.
And you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, you could. The room went dead, and I was hoping that that question was never answered. The room just fell silent. So, but I do, Dr. Pollard, would you help me again? We made our first board presentation in Atlanta, Georgia, right before technology. So, believe it or not, thanks to Dr. Pollard and his at that time lovely young daughter Kimberly. This was what we actually used in the first board presentation, and you can clearly see the progress of the train, and this went on now for nearly 20 years looking like this. And one thing I'll say as I come out from underneath this here in just a second, I'll move. Could you hold that just to the side for just one moment so I can say, ladies and gentlemen, this is just my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but we know because we had the facts and figures. But I doubt seriously that Amtrak will ever put out a sheet covering 1999 to 2018 and compare every train, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, in revenue and ridership production. And the reason that probably won't happen is because what you'll see is the same thing that you're seeing here over that nearly 20-year run. It's just what was done and what could be done again. And I'm not advocating. I'm not here saying that local revenue management should come back out on every train. That's, I'd love to see it, but that's pie in the sky stuff at this date. So really what this podcast is about is a history of what we were able to accomplish, but also to let the future generations know it's out there. It can be done again.
And let me tell you what I think seriously about why it was difficult to embrace. There is some mode of thought of judging an employee by what he or she does.
Correct.
And if you do or perform a certain task in which you get paid for, you don't have the status to go over here or to go higher. When we start looking at what a person does instead of what a person is capable of doing, we lose a lot. Mm-hmm. If you get focused that I'm just a little ticket agent in a small town, what do I know about revenue management? What do I know about going here? You follow me? And that's what holds the company back. Instead of listening to what an employee is saying and how he or she is saying, and then watch and see what that employee can do, back up, that's what we should look at. That is exactly what we should look at. But we don't do that. We like to pigeonhole people in these little categories, and that's where we want you to stay. We want you to stay in that little category.
Ms. Smith, when you were...
Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
When you were general manager of the Southwestern Business Group, as you were, had everything from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean, to the Pacific Ocean, tell us again. I know what you said. You actually had... I'm not hiding the name. I just can't remember the name. But you actually had a young manager. I remember you telling me a young female manager out of corporate on a conference call who said to you, "Miss Smith, what do you figure? You feel people have about an 8th grade education, and you let her out."
Oh my God! Yeah, it's because you do put people in these little pigeonholes, and you tend to judge them on what you see them doing instead of what they know and what they're capable of being. The human being is a complex thing, being a human. You've got many things going on. You're many things. You're a husband, but you're also a friend. You're a brother, but you're also an uncle. You're a grandfather, but you're also a great-grandfather. A human being is composed of many things and capable of doing many things. Why do we want to pigeonhole that? And you've got employees just like you guys are out in this field right now, I do believe it, who are dying to be able to shine or to do something different. You just need someone to say, come on, you can do that.
You mentioned that we went to Riverside and did a presentation for the groups. Remember also we did several presentations where we convinced, well, I don't want to say convinced, we suggested that these folks need to get out and ride the train. And a lot of times they did because they need to know the product.
Certainly did. And, that's right.
And
that's you had people out there at Riverside had never been on a long-distance train, but you were supposed to be selling it.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what we did?
I can't remember.
We gave them deluxe bedroom trips. People went berserk that we were giving away a deluxe bedroom. But you get a couple of reservations agents and put them in a deluxe bedroom, L.A. to Chicago, who have never been on a train. Mm-hmm. Do you know what the revenue and ridership potential is in the lifetime of that employee?
How can you sell what you don't know?
How can you sell
yes, yes. That's right. I forgot that, Jesse.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, people from Wilmington started sending their people out, too, on long-distance trains. So
Before I forget, I want to do the other. Again, we did a board presentation just prior to technology, but also thanks to Dr. Pollard. This shows a strict comparison of FY 99 versus FY 2000. And it shows the. Well, you want to talk about this? Because you wrote that.
It basically shows the improved ridership. It also shows that the Texas Eagle did not exist in a vacuum. It does not exist in a vacuum. That when external factors, on-time performance, the weather, all kinds of things, were adversely affecting other trains, it would pull the Texas Eagle down too. But the point we were trying to make with that is that while we're all affected by these outside influences, because we were doing local revenue management, we could be on top of it a little bit better, and thus our declines were less than the other trains would be. So the point was to be that at the time we were trying to argue that local revenue management should be expanded nationwide, obviously.
So I think that just further points out that, well, here's where I want to go with this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, just what Mrs. Smith was talking about how human beings are complex people and that you have to understand their different facets. Can you imagine the privilege that the four of us have had and still have of working for this woman?
Oh, please.
Because when you heard, I know she's not going to, she's going to have some false modesty there. But you can imagine, because this woman isn't doing this for the podcast, this woman would say this stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning when we thought the world was coming to an end because, of Hurricane Katrina or a UP freight train derailment that's going to tie up the railroad for a week, or
our Amtrak derailments.
Or our own Amtrak derailment, certainly. Certainly. So,
yeah, we had, didn't we have a terrible derailment there out at Marshall?
Ma'am, we did.
Yes.
I'm going to do, God willing, as you say, as I say too, God willing, I'm going to do a podcast on that. That's the major Amtrak derailment that no one's ever heard of. Because our train 21 had left Marshall just after, on 9/11, just after the first plane had crashed into the tower, and between Marshall and Longview, the train derailed and the whole train turned over, and then the second plane went into the tower, and we didn't know. Is this nationwide? That's for another story. But,
also, Tim, when we had that, I know this might be getting off revenue management, but when we had that not the derailment, when the plane went into the Twin Towers, all airlines shut down. 2 people got on our train in St. Louis that was connected some kind. Did we not take them off at Dallas? Didn't we hold the train out when the passengers were complaining that these 2 guys were acting suspicious?
Your memory's better than mine, man.
And remember, what was it that our Amtrak policeman, he's gone now, right, who got involved with that? And when we got to Dallas, the train was told to we held outside of Dallas a little bit, and we took those 2 guys off that train. I never did find out if they were connected or anything, but the passengers was very, very, very nervous about it. But when I think about working 9 to 5, there was nothing ordinary about our jobs. Nothing ordinary about your job. It was no 9 to 5. I'm telling you.
The Texas Eagle was a particularly challenging route
Yes.
to work on. I never will forget many years ago the agent at Galesburg, Illinois, saying to me these words that Of course, that was on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe route in those days. And the agent at Galesburg said, well, we never have to put up with a train hardly ever more than about 15 or 20 minutes late. You mean your train's run an hour or two late?
Oh, my God.
I said, well, if we're living right, they run.
Oh, my God. I remember when we thought a 4-hour train was on time.
Amen.
Yeah, all right. I remember that.
Which brings us to a wonderful point about how important local revenue management was to the UP-SP merger and the difficulties those two railroads had coming together. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, this team, these folks in this room were able to successfully manage ridership and revenue in the middle of that meltdown.
And what did we have in Dallas, your team that you had that when we hired...
We were doing the delay reporting.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. That's
Deck
right.
Center.
That's right, the Deck Center. I just think of the things that spin off of that. Employees was doing in the Deck Center, keeping up with the on-time performance. We were sharing that with the railroads. Railroads' performance got better because instead of just a dead train out there, well, this train is moving, Amtrak is coming up here, you begin to know the people that were behind the scenes and what they were going through. And then they begin to know us. And what did that create? Better working conditions. Each side willing to help one another. How many times we go to the UP and sit down and talk with them and thank them for what they were doing. Then we'd go over to the BNSF on their campus and thank them. You can't do everything by machine or by telephone. You have to come in and touch one another and see one another and get an opportunity to walk 5 minutes in my shoes. I get an opportunity to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. You know, don't tell me that there's still not a format for making better working conditions. And I just don't really think that people think they have time to do that today. They think all you have to do is have a Zoom call. You know, and the thing about the Zoom call is look good from your head down, but mine was underneath that.
Well, you're so right, Mrs. Smith, and I almost forgot to interject. Look what we were able to do in our time locally revenue managing the train. We put out a weekly report to the Union Pacific Railroad of on time of where the Union Pacific would follow endpoint to endpoint, but we put out intermediate on time
yes, we did.
indices to the
That's
Union
right.
Pacific, as well as ticketed group moves for the next week, so their dispatchers would know.
That's
well,
right.
you're going to have 100 people getting on here and getting off there, which again, not rocket science. That's just old railroad protocol. That's just Amtrak sometimes tried to fix some things that were never broken.
Right.
And this was one of them.
The UP contract situation, they basically studied the train endpoint to endpoint. And the train left, when they got the train, it was at St. Louis. It left St. Louis on time. It got to San Antonio on time. It might be 4 hours late at
In
Dallas
between.
in between.
That's right. That's right.
Because of the way the schedule was set up. And most of the passengers, or a big group of the passengers, were getting on and off in Dallas. So when they realized, through what you're talking about, that even though the train endpoints were on time, a big number of the passengers were being severely inconvenienced, I think that helped them understand the product that Amtrak was trying to deliver. Just what you said, when both sides can meet, and we, Amtrak understands, or at the local level, understood what the UP was dealing with. And I remember when Tom Mulligan and Nisi Patterson, who were the two UP officials that would always come to Texas Eagle Marketing Group meetings, that including that intermediate information, you could see the wheels start turning in their head.
You could.
Yeah.
You could.
You guys created some wonderful relationships that I have to say that respect and feeling of accomplishment. I can't think. I used to say, "Oh, this employee's not doing a good job." Do you think an employee gets up in the morning, get ready to go to work, and say, "Well, I think I'm just going to go to work and just screw up the day"? No, employee don't think that. There's not an employee don't think he or she is doing a good job. You have to show them. You have to let folks know. And I think that's what we did when we sit down and said to the UP, You know, and they respected that, they accepted that, and you build relationships. And our on-time performance at points did improve. You know, really, really did improve, and did not harm us at all that I happened to live in Fort Worth, right down the street from the BNSF headquarters. You know, and I used to tell Rich West, I say, I can walk right up to you.
Don't make me come up.
Don't make me. Yeah.
And don't forget, in this process, we also took ownership of the Longview Houston and Longview Shreveport throughway buses. We revenue managed them too, and I'm firmly convinced to this day that that's the main reason that both of those services have strong ridership, because we gave them a solid foundation.
Now just imagine a bus ride we made successful. You have a bus run where we talked about how we're going to get back our Houston ridership. People can buy a ticket out of Chicago or out of New York or whatever, get off at Longview, get the bus, and go straight to Houston. Or they can go up to Shreveport, Louisiana, to the gambling casinos. And that bus has been running 30 years. 30 years to this day, that bus is still running. It's a wonderful success story. Wonderful.
Now, to be fair, I have to level the playing field here, and under the heading of not rocket science, people would ask about the success of the Longview Houston bus, and I would frequently say, well, it's because of the job we do. But when you're connecting the third and fourth largest cities in the United States, the market is kind of already built in. It's not like we had to go out and beat the bushes.
But most people don't want to ride a bus,
Right.
And these people have been riding that bus. How long is it from Longview to Houston?
4 hours.
They've been riding that bus for 30 years, Tim. Can you believe that?
Yeah, but we have some nice buses.
Oh, yes, that's
do.
the other thing. They're very nice and clean, and the drivers are just wonderful and supportive and all. I just wish I could just pick up Longview and just take them everywhere and show them, this is how you do it. This is what you do. This is how you get a success. No, just wonderful employees. I remember when how all of the employees would call when we thought we were going to lose the train, how they got on the phone calling a local senator and congressman and writing letters. It's just one big old family.
You mean stuff that you can get fired for today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The worry about it, we knew what was right, and you went ahead and did it, and you were willing to take the chance to do that. And I believe with all my heart you still have those type employees like yourself, like we were. I still think they still exist in this company.
We were not terminally unique, ladies and gentlemen. Those people still exist.
They still exist.
They just need to be identified.
Just need to be identified and recognized, Yeah. Well, it was just wonderful working with you. What a blessing. And I know it's a blessing because there would have been no way this little gal from New York City and Harlem would ever have planned to come live in Texas. I mean, that would not have been on my mind in a million years. So I know that was God intervention. I had no doubt in my mind. All right.
While I want each of our podcast guests here to be thinking about that one revenue management story that needs to be told that's untold, that one experience that happened to them. But I'm going to tell mine. In the middle of this local revenue management process, we changed the division points for the train. The passenger train operated with conductors and engineers from Fort Worth to Texarkana, and that was historical from the railroad days. We changed that from Texarkana at first to Longview, and then Longview to Little Rock, meaning that we had to build a crew change room at Longview. And Mrs. Smith and I will admit my complicity, statute of limitations have run out, so you don't have to worry. This story is well in excess of 20 years old, but we built the reason it has to do with local revenue management, we eventually, quickly, soon after, moved the crew change point to Marshall. And so this old crew change facility became the local revenue management office, the headquarters for local revenue management, right above the Longview ticket office. But anyway, Mr. Cooper called me one day and he said, I see these plans here. We're not going to have a shower or a bathroom in the crew change point. We're not putting that in. And I said, well, Mr. Cooper, you're going to have to call Miss Smith. You're going to have to call the boss lady because even though I'm not against the shower and bathroom, it wasn't my idea. But we built that, Mrs. Smith, on emergency exchange vouchers. And I won't go into much detail about that, but emergency exchange vouchers were not necessarily designed to build crew change.
No, it wasn't.
But guess what happened? I say it again because I stand in awe of having served and stood along you people. We would still be waiting for a crew change room at Longview, Texas, if we had waited for the process. You had to have one, and you got it built.
We had to have it.
We had to build ridership and revenue in the Texas Eagle, and we went and we did it.
And I think of all the obstacles that came in your way. All right, we thought we were going to lose the train. We saved the train. Then they reroute us, take us off the route. Just, Lord have mercy, what's going on? Tim, we got to go talk to the Union Pacific. And I remember we went down there to Spring, Texas.
To Mr. Barkley.
And that man sat up there like a lump on the log, wouldn't smile, wouldn't look one way or nothing. And I can see his face was straight ahead. And I was sitting on the side of him, and I looked at him and he didn't want to look at me. And I said, that's all right, you're going to give us what we want when we leave out here. This is what I said to myself. And we had gotten to an impasse. You remember we just couldn't come. And Tim said, what if I give you some time? And he perked up with that. In other words, take some time out of the schedule because they swore their best route was from Chicago to Marshall, Texas. Take some time out of the schedule. How did that go, Tim?
Put some time in.
Oh, we put time, right. But that's what sold them.
Right.
And we left out of there with what we wanted. Wasn't Audrey Kell, the mayor of Marshall, with us?
She was, and a part of that process.
Yes.
If you'll remember, we had the celebration of returning the train back to its original route in the Marshall Depot.
That's
with
right.
Audrey Carroll and Senator K.
Bailey Hutchinson, yes.
Yeah.
Was in the room.
Because it didn't harm to have Senator K. Bailey Hutchinson on our side at all. No, it didn't.
I want to go around the room here. Jesse, any thoughts?
Let's see. I guess
You want me to come back to you?
I guess the statutes of limitation have run out.
Yes.
I remember our nice conductors that always worked with us. They loved having these bedrooms available south of Fort Worth. And it became quite a hit.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's right. That's right.
Quite a hit for couples. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
In the local revenue management process, we don't care what they do. We just want the credit card.
Yeah. Let me just build on that, because my thing with the sleeping car was to fill the rooms, every little block of space. And there was a lot of space between Austin and San Antonio in both directions. The trains run on that kind of a bell curve where it peaks in the middle on ridership, all that. It's lower on the ends. There were a couple of conductors, particularly on the south end. J.J. Casano was
one.
The,
Good, yes,
the
yes,
best
yes.
one. But he shared that of we're not going to have empty rooms of the sleeper coming on 22 out of
San Antonio.
And he just did a masterful job. I do everything I could do beforehand, pull all the bells and whistles to sell the space in advance. But when that train left the station, that was an expendable commodity, and he was determined to put somebody in those seats. And he did a fine job of it. And going south from Austin to San Antonio was the same thing. And there have comments have been made that there was that was a very attractive short trip for UT students sometimes to make a weekend trip to Los Angeles and just start partying in Austin. But that was fine. They're paying for this ticket. More power to them.
Yeah.
Tim, any thoughts?
Well, just to go along with what Dr. Pollard said, the conductors, after they learned about what the revenue management team was doing, and also were accepting their input.
Yeah.
Brought into it. And JJ was one.
Yes.
He was the best.
He was the best.
So, that gives them an opportunity to say, how can we improve the ridership? How can we improve to bring in the funds that we need instead of watching these cars or these.
Just go empty, empty. Yes.
And it got a buy-in with a lot of conductors that I always thought
was not to it. That's
they
right.
did.
That's
They
right.
did.
That's right.
Because that meant extra work for them. It was
It
extra
did.
paperwork.
It did.
And that's the thing, the teamwork on this whole process.
Exactly.
That is right.
But from the train crew and from our standpoint, the having you as management people that were willing to stick your neck out a little bit or do with something a little bit unorthodox. I think of the six Amtrak presidents. Look at the different personalities of those 6 men that we worked under. Massively different personality. What did they all have in common? They were all railroaders. To some degree.
Yeah. They were all railroaders. That's right.
The one that came after, who I won't even call his name, was not a railroader, had no clue what railroading had to do or had to offer. And that's kind of where we are with Amtrak today.
Yeah, true.
I'm not quite sure I agree with that. I did not know anything about railroads. Nothing. Did not interest me at all. I came to work for Amtrak for the summer. I was leaving, going back and teaching school. I had no intentions of staying. I think it was 10 years I'd been with Amtrak when I kept saying, I'm leaving, I'm not staying here. And an employee said to me, you've been here 10 years already, Miss Smith. You may as well stay. You're going to stay here. I was in the Northeast Quarter. I was a Northeast Quarter girl. Now, I say that for a reason. Once I got involved, it started when they moved me into New Orleans, and I had the Sunset and the Crescent. This is what I like doing. This is fascinating me. So I learned. You may not, I'm saying that to say, I didn't know anything about the railroad. Where did my passion come from? The men and women that I work with inspired me, and then I wanted to learn. If you work around you three and you don't get passion from you four, there's something wrong with you. You're dead. Something is wrong with you. And so even if you came and you don't know, learn, embrace it. Talk to the people you need to speak to give you the knowledge and understanding of what you're in charge for. What I get upset about is that you don't try to learn and you try to make Amtrak fit in your kind of bucket. It is not made to fit in anybody's bucket. It is a unique operation on its own. Learn and embrace that uniqueness. That's what makes it. Otherwise, we've been around, over 50 years? All right? And part of that is not because the government has been giving us money. It is the men and women like y'all that have died and supported and loved and struggled with keeping this company going. And those men and women like yourselves, y'all are still out there in the field today. I believe that with all my heart.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Don't come to me. I don't said my part.
Well, I'm still coming to you, Miss Smith. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Smith and I were married in a previous life. But
And I had to kill him.
killed me. Well, one of the things that you left out, Miss Smith, is the difference is, Dr. Pollard said it, those 6 presidents were railroaders.
Yes.
7th and beyond, maybe not. But your difference of not being a railroader, I've told you this 100 times, and so here's 101. You are the finest observer and reactor to human nature and what humans will do and won't do of anybody I've ever met in my life. And that's why it was such a humble privilege to be a part of your original core team.
Oh, you all was the ones who gave me that energy. I got my energy and inspiration from y'all.
I remember that day, McMahon, was it, that came down to introduce you?
Oh, yes. Art McMahon,
and,
yes.
And he said...
He was vice president.
He was president. He was the...
That's right.
Yes, he was president of Inner City, yeah.
And he was talking about how they're going to hold people accountable and this and that. And you and I are standing there, and she's being introduced, and I'm like, so you're telling me that if she doesn't perform, you're going to fire her? And he looked at her and goes, yes. And then we looked at each other, and she looked at us like, gotta keep an eye on these guys.
glad he's gone and we still here. Didn't he?
Dr. Pollard, I have a question for you. That'll be the lead in to something that I want to make sure you talk about in here. What if I had told you, I'm gonna choose a year, the inaugural Amtrak service to Arkansas and East Texas. What if I had told you in 1974 that you and I, along with these other remarkable people, are going to revenue manage this train, and we're going to have a set-out sleeper and engine at Little Rock, Arkansas, and carry the entire Arkansas state legislature from Little Rock to Austin? What would you have said if I told you
Oh,
that?
in 1974, I would have told you were crazy.
But tell us what happened.
Well, just as you said, it did happen.
It did happen.
The state legislature wanted to go to Austin. They contacted Todd Stennis, who was in government affairs at the time, and he made it along with everybody else, pulling the necessary strings.
Well, he didn't have red tape. He picked up the phone and called local revenue management.
Exactly.
And he got the rooms like that.
Yep.
And
It was, yeah.
And there was a set-out sleeper and engine at Little Rock. Is that right?
It was necessary to have a locomotive also because there was no standby power at Little Rock, and you otherwise were going to be putting all these VIPs in a hot car. It was, as I recall, July or August. It was in the middle of the summer.
Yes, it was.
So not only did they commit to a sleeping car, which was a very valuable commodity at that time, but also a locomotive to do it, and it was impressive. Yeah, I was surprised.
But look at what we were able to do. Imagine, I would imagine there is probably to this day some goodwill fallout from that many people on the train in those political positions who now have some knowledge of why Amtrak is important to the state of Arkansas.
Well, secondary to revenue management, but thanks to these managers here, both of y'all, how many times did we have a display train at Little Rock, Arkansas for Riverfest?
That's right.
Or
That's right.
Longview,
And
or Austin, or yes.
And not just a display train, but the dining car would be staffed. We would have VIPs, the mayors, elected officials, business and civic leaders come on the car and have dinner in the diner as the train sat on a spur track at Little Rock, usually watching fireworks because there was a big fireworks demonstration. Those people got off the train just in shell shock.
That's
They
right.
had no idea that mode of transportation existed. And to this day, I know that there are people that have a very favorable outlook on passenger rail because of the experience they had that one time on the train.
Yes. I've had young folks come up to me and say, "I remember you. You're the train man." From going to these presentations in Operation Lifesaver, and they now have kids, and they were taking their kids on the train.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh well, okay.
it does.
It makes a big
does make
difference.
difference. It does
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Well, I want to ask. May I ask a question? I want to ask a question.
Ma'am, you're the boss no matter where you are.
How many years of service?
41.
Any regrets?
Nope.
Would you say revenue management was one of the best things we did?
It was one of the most hardest and best things and fun things to do.
All right. How many years, Tim?
39.
What would you say was the best? Because you've got a lot of little things you did. Which one was the best?
Well,
What's close to top 10?
top 10, well, coming to work for Amtrak was.
Uh-huh.
It provided a quality of life I wasn't used to working in freight. I
Mm-hmm.
knew when I left Dallas, go to Houston, come back as an engineer, I'd be home that night with my family.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe off the next day, we're in freight, working on an engineer extra board. I might leave home today and be back in 3 days, come home and stay 8 hours, and I'm
And get back down the road.
again. So
Uh-huh.
it provided a better quality of life for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the best move I ever made.
You, sir?
Because of the Texas State Railroad Authority, 53 years and counting
Mm-hmm.
right now this year, and by far local revenue management was the highlight of my railroad career, and I have absolutely zero regrets. This is just my personal opinion, but I would have a feeling there might be some similar thought about this. revenue management of each train, I didn't realize it until we started doing it, is literally the backbone of every operation.
It is.
And particularly if you have new service that's going to start up, you're going to make or break that new service right out the gate on how you revenue manage that train.
Dr. Pollard?
I can't count the years because I left Amtrak early on. But when
they count.
Well, when I left Amtrak in 1974 to go to dental school, it was really a coin toss. I almost stayed with Amtrak, and my parents were scared to death that I was going to make. But they knew I was doing even at that point with all the problems, something I enjoyed doing. So to go to dental school and then to get back involved with y'all and with revenue management and to be doing it at this level of actually being able to see results, not just talk about them or preach about them, but actually do something and make some results. It was a big deal. Still is.
Tell us about the day that how you and Miss
Oh,
Smith
Lord.
met. Please tell that story. Then I want to hear her version.
Oh, Lord.
Well,
Go tell the truth.
a decision had been made to put the dining car on the rear of the Texas Eagle, and there were good and legitimate reasons, which I'll let Miss Smith tell. But the downside of it, the end car on the train is kind of like cracking the whip. It gets a lot of lateral movement, and for a food service car, the people eating on the train, it was a little bit less than desirable ride. So I was not quite as diplomatic as Miss Smith has taught me to be in intervening years. And I wrote a it wasn't obscene letter, but it was a rather forceful letter, and discussing that dining car. And I'm not sure who it originally went to. I think it might have gone to Mark Magliari.
That's right, it did.
He forwarded it to you. And the next thing I know, here's this person calling me and wanting to know if we could meet at the Little Rock station. And I thought, well, I'm armed for bear. I think it's a bad move. I'll go have my say and they can have their say. And we came out of it being best friends, and it's been that way ever since.
That's right.
Now, wait. Now, who won whether the dining car stayed on the rear or not?
He actually did.
He did.
Right, but he did. He wrote a letter and he wanted to say, "What dumb so and so put the diner on the rear and all of the reasons why." And when I call him, I say, "I'm that dumb so and so to put the diner on the rear. Where can we talk?" And we did meet, and he expressed what his concern was, and we were having people who saying that the dishes was jumping. It was not a good move.
It was a long walk.
And it was, and then if you had the coaches all the way up front, and the sleeper was behind the engine, and then all of the coaches, so your first class has got to walk all the way in the back. It was not a good move, and I admitted to that. I think when you're wrong, you're wrong. You know, and we've been good friends ever since. But I wanted him to know I was the dumb one to put it back there.
Well, there had to have been an operating reason. Why did you put it back there?
I really can't remember why. It had to do something with the sleepers.
I think part of it
was
The
something.
run through, wasn't it?
It had to do something with the sleepers.
And the crews were having problems with people going through the car.
So
by having it on the end, it was going to
Stop
It really did have something because if the sleepers on the
reasons,
front, they didn't have any of those people walking through their sleepers.
Right.
With the sleeper where it was, not only did they have the dining car people, walking through, it was coach people walking through. And, they going to look in the sleep. You don't have the privacy, and we thought the first class should have the privacy. I believe we did put the sleeper on the rear, didn't we? Because that allowed them. And it was something with the cutoff cars.
Well, the sleeper on the cutoff.
Yes, down in San Antonio. Yes, right. Yeah, but that is exactly how we met. Right.
Let's go around to see what are last thoughts. Who wants to go first? And any last thoughts of any kind?
Well, I don't have no last thoughts.
I've never seen this group silent.
I don't have any last thoughts because I'm always thinking about something. So I don't have any last thoughts. I'm just saying that it is interesting to know that you don't know what's going to happen to you in life. I think that's what's the most exciting thing about living it would be very boring if you knew everything that was going to happen. You can imagine some things and you can think that you're planning some things. But I had 41 years of a wonderful career with Amtrak, which the absolute best of my career was having the privilege of working with you guys. It was just wonderful. I learned so much. I really became like the mother hen. I would absolutely have a fit if anybody did anything to any one of you, and they know that. And when you look back, you can't see those things when you're going through it. Wonderful things that you accomplish. Employees that are now, you've inspired Tim to be conductors and engineers, and here they are, engineers and conductors. Young people that were LSAs, now they're ticket agents or they're station managers when I think of Alex and where she's come from. The lives that you have touched and that we have touched in a positive way, the respect that we've gotten from our company. We all winners of Amtrak's highest award given to an employee, the Amtrak President and Achievement Award. And so it's just been a wonderful, wonderful career and a wonderful time. And to think that we are blessed to all be retired, except for one, to all be retired and happily retired and as healthy as we can be at this stage and age, it's just a miracle to me. It's just magnificent.
Yeah. When you first let me know about this podcast, I thought to myself, wow, that's different. And I started thinking about all the things since I started in 1975, August 13th. Mm-hmm. And before my 60 days were up, my manager, Mosley, says, now, Jess, we got a vacancy in Houston. I was in San Antonio. He says, I need for you to get out there. I've never been to Houston. I don't know anybody over there. He says, well, you got to make 60 days. Never forget that. And I'm like, okay, JR, I'll go. So I went there, had a great time, went back, and from there on, I think I've worked a lot of stations in between, and just going across the country was wonderful. But the best time I ever had was with the President's Service and Safety Awards Committee, because I learned a lot about a lot of people. You talk about how many diamonds are out there that we have.
We got a lot of diamonds. That's right.
And it was so rewarding to see all that. The last few years that I did that, it was fantastic.
And what a magnificent accolade you got, because I was there in Washington when they gave you the standing ovation and round of applause for your service.
I was just happy they chose me.
Tim? It was your job, yeah. I mean, coming to Amtrak was it. Everything else is gravy.
Well, I think what I learned or what I saw was, when times get tough, you think, what are we going to do? They're going to pull our train off. They're going to pull our livelihood off. And then watching everybody come together, not only the employees, the management team, and the Tempo group. I mean, the group that would eventually come Tempo, put together the city managers, the mayors, to support this team. I learned you can make it happen.
That's
you
right.
got to make an effort to make it happen.
Right.
You just can't say, okay, goodbye.
Yes,
and
right.
I saw that. So
that's right.
Yep. That's what I remember.
Okay, well, Doc?
Well, I think just the ability to be part of the whole process was really my big thing. The people that you meet along the way, I mean, all the people in this room, of course, but I had a chance to go to Atlanta, and I remember when Mike Chandler was the head of the Crescent at that point, and gave us some rather pointed instructions on how to handle the board presentation, and just different people along the way. Carlton McDonald in Washington, and Bruce Van Zandt, and people who were just names in the so-called rail fan fraternity, to actually meet the people and be able to interact with them on some level off and on it's something that I cherish. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line for me is I would never have had the experience to work with you fine people, salt of the earth, I just talked about Pat Calton, the relief agent and later agent at Longview, who had my back for 30 years. But easily the best 2 years of my working years is when we had Texarkana together. Because you had two people dedicated, passionate, wanted to make it run right, and it did run right, and we had each other's backs for that entire time. And it was a different time, and it was a different place. But the good news is Amtrak needs everybody's help today also. And what was old was not necessarily wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Jesse and Bill and Tim and Joy and I are available to revenue manage any train in the system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, beginning today, if you call.
I had to think of something funny with Jesse.
Yeah.
With Jesse, because I think he thought he was going to get fired. We're doing inspection of his territory, driving the car. And then all of a sudden we stop. It's late at night. We just left Texarkana and we're coming back down. Late at night, and the car just stopped. I said, "Well, what is it, Jesse?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, oh my God, we stopped up here in the middle of the road. We out of gas." So he says to me, "Well, you know, when my tank is going on my car, I get a little ding, ding, ding." I said, "Well, we ain't getting no ding, ding, ding here." And he had to leave me in the car on a 2-lane dark road while he walked to the nearest gasoline station to come back. I think that you talking about sweating bullets. He was.
How far was that?
But
You said you weren't going to do that, so we get on the phone and we called DPS, and DPS.
I know I would.
Remember he said,
Oh my God! Yes, I can't.
two government employees run out of gas. Oh my God!
I told my car does ding, ding, ding.
That was a time I.
Oh my God, that was something else. Then I could not believe it.
You roll down the window, you hear all these critters out there.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was terrible. I
What,
just
was it
knew
on
that.
59?
No, it was
No,
30.
that was on
30.
30.
Oh, wow.
That was on 30.
That was,
That's
oh,
right.
Lord, no.
Before we got to so.
I said, "Lord, this is vampire time." Late at night. And we never let that happen again.
No.
Well, thank you each and all from the bottom
You're
of my
so
heart.
welcome. Thank you.
You know, I say this on every podcast, ladies and gentlemen. If these exist 100 years from now, somebody is going to be happy that we did this, and can say, what were the railroad people back in 2010 or 2020 thinking about, and how did they operate, and what did they accomplish? I'll just close with this. Amtrak needs all of our help today. So those who believe in rail passenger service and the importance of it in our mobility and economic future, the time is now to step forward, because we know you're out there.
Mm-hmm.
And God bless each and every one of you. I love each and every one of you.
Same here.
Respect each and every one of you. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Is that it?
That's it.